Bismillahi walhamdulillah wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and peace be upon you all. Welcome to this session on how do we process what's happening in Palestine? How do we take care of our heart? This is what I'm going to be focusing on today. You know, with everything going on in the world, not just what's happening in Palestine, but with all the suffering that we're witnessing, with all, everything that's happening in Palestine, Lebanon, even Syria, and Yemen. There's so much going on in the world, and I think it can get really overwhelming for a lot of people. But especially with what's happening in Palestine, I mean, the genocide and what we're exposed to on a daily basis, the horror that we're exposed to online, it's so important that we take care of our hearts, and it's so important that we assess how we're processing everything that we're absorbing. Because, on a psychological level, whether you're aware of it or not, your brain is absorbing everything that you basically are exposed to. So the second you look at a video, your brain is exposed to that. Your brain is processing that. It has a job to do. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created it as this magnificent machine, and it has a job to process what you absorb from the world, what you witness in the world. So you intake information through your five senses, right? These are the portals in which we interact with the world and intake information for processing. Every time you look at something, every time you hear something, every time you touch something, every time you taste something, every time you smell something, you are intaking information. That's information that your brain is absorbing. It is processing it. It's organizing it, right? And it's storing it. So it's constantly doing that. Whether you tell it, you cannot tell it to stop. It's constantly doing that job because it has a job to do. It obeys Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala just as every other organ in your body does. And it does it without you, whether you're conscious of it or not. But that's really powerful. So first, what I will say is that I don't think our brain is designed to absorb that much through social media. It's not designed to absorb that much. It's not designed to absorb video after video after video of the most horrific images. And that, because that all stays within you. And if you're not aware and if you're not conscious of, how you're processing it, it all stays up here and it overwhelms you. And if you neglect your heart in that process of making sure that you are processing it the right way, it's only going to affect you negatively. So that's why it's so important to engage the heart in the process of, taking care of or interpreting or deriving meaning from what we absorb. So a lot of people, they're just absorbing, but then they neglect their heart. And this is what I'm saying, is that it's not good to just go on cruise control and absorb while neglecting this greater intellect, which is the heart. And this is something I focus on in my Heart Over Mind and Ego method. This method that I developed to help people understand the different tools within them. What is the brain for? What is the heart for? And one of the foundational teachings of this method is that this heart has a greater intellect. This heart has a greater capacity to derive meaning and truths that sometimes the brain cannot. So despite the brain being such a magnificent creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I think the brain is, I can't understand how people study the brain and do not believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because the brain itself, looking at it and the way it functions, the way it processes information and stores it and, organizes information is unbelievable. It's a miracle in itself. But despite how great it is, the heart is greater. The heart has this greater aql. It's the greater aql. It has these greater cognitive capacities, which what I mean by that is it has a greater capacity to understand and make sense and derive meaning and engage in tadabbur. In my method, I talk about how you need the mind to engage in tafakkur, which is the basically basic level of reflection and thinking and, thinking about different things and reflecting upon them. But tadabbur, it has to do with the ending conclusion, the final interpretation, how you deeply interpret what you're absorbing. So it's a deeper level and higher level than tafakkur. And why I'm saying this is because while we're absorbing everything that's happening in the world, many people are not even engaging in tafakkur, yet alone tadabbur, right? Where they are looking for meaning, where they're engaging their heart, directing this heart on the eye of their heart on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to derive greater meanings from what we're absorbing. So what's happening to a lot of people is that they're just, absorbing everything that's happening in Palestine, and then they're not doing anything with it. So what happens then is that it overwhelms the person. It weighs the person down. The person becomes in a bad state. They become unable. They become even sometimes passive. They feel too overwhelmed to make dua, too overwhelmed to feel like their efforts mean anything. So people get into a state of hopelessness. I mean, even early on, after October 7, I had people ask me, what's the point of making dua? This is what's happening when you're absorbing and not engaging this heart that you have to bring back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sound, right? So we have to engage the heart, because, to answer this question that this person asked, what's the point of even making dua? The point is, see, the brain will process the information and come back to you with that. Okay, but all of this is happening. I make dua, nothing is happening. 1 + 1 = 2. That's how the brain works. It's rational, right? It looks, it goes, it searches for answers, comes back to you with basically what is in front of it. The heart has the capacity to see beyond what is seen, to see the ghaib, to see what is, there's basar, which is sight, what you see with your physical eyes. And then there's basira, which is insight, greater sight, or spiritual sight, the sight of the heart that sees what the physical eye cannot see. So a lot of people are looking, with their physical eyes, and they're seeing what's happening in Gaza, they're seeing what's happening in the world, and they're like, what's the point? What's my dua going to do? Because nothing's changing. The heart comes, you engage the heart, and you attach the heart to Allah, you direct the eye of this heart on Allah, the heart comes back to you with a different answer. And it is this. It doesn't matter if I don't see the answer of what I'm asking. It is with Allah. And with Allah, it has value regardless if I see the answer to my dua in my lifetime. Even if you do not see the answer of all your dua for Palestine in your lifetime, it still has value and meaning with Allah. So even if today is your final day on this earth, it's not going to matter to you. If today is your final day on this earth, it's not going to matter to you what happens to Palestine tomorrow. Because khalas, your book is closed. Now you have to present everything to Allah, and in that, everything that you've done. And if you want part of that record to be that I made dua for Palestine, I made dua for the people of Gaza, I got up for tahajjud for them, I donated, I shared, I spread I spread the truth about what's happening there. I did what I can. I called my politicians. I tried to, I went to a protest. I did what I could. That's what matters. And I think we forget that. We judge the value of what we're doing by what is happening. So we make dua, we look to Gaza, nothing's changing. Oh, then it means that what I'm doing is not right. No, it has value with Allah. That's where the heart comes in. The heart looks for value with Allah. So the brain, it processes, it goes, okay, I made dua, it processes facts. The heart, when attached to Allah, it always derives meaning. It always looks for meaning. It looks for value with Allah despite what the physical eye sees. And this is why in Surah Al-Baqarah, why does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when describing the people of taqwa, why is the first description, الَّذِينَ يُؤْمِنُونَ بِالْغَيْبِ? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Al-Baqarah, after he tells us, ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابُ لَا رَيْبَ فِيهِ, this is the book in which there is no doubt. So no doubt, هُدًى لِلْمُتَّقِينَ, guidance for those who have taqwa. Who are the people of taqwa? الَّذِينَ يُؤْمِنُونَ بِالْغَيْبِ وَيُقِيمُونَ الصَّلَاةَ وَمِمَّا رَزَقْنَاهُمْ يُنْفِقُونَ, those who believe in the unseen and get up, establish the prayer and give out of what we have provided for them. So charity. But prayer is the first thing we're going to be asked about on the Day of Judgment. So how is it belief in the unseen comes before prayer? It's not a coincidence, because belief in the unseen is the foundation of every act of worship. If you think of even prayer, for you to be so deeply connected in prayer, for your prayer to come to life, for your heart to come to life in prayer, you have to be connected to Al-Ghaib. You have to be connected to the unseen. Why? Because even as you're standing there, your creator, the one who you're standing in front of, is unseen. Allah responding to you after every verse of Surah Al-Fatiha is unseen. It's something that is happening, but it's unseen. The angels on your right and left, that is unseen. So your connection to all of these things brings all your acts of worship to life. and you know that everything has value with Allah in the unseen, beyond the veil, even if you do not see it with your physical eye. This is the essential and core meaning of what it means to have taqwa, is you believe in what is happening for you, even when you do not see it. You are so conscious of Allah and His life and His plan for your life that you have this certainty. This is taqwa, tawakkul. This is iman, is you believe that He is planning for you and not against you. We need the same. We need belief in the unseen when we are observing what is happening in the world. We need belief in the unseen, iman bil ghaib, when we are looking at what's happening in Gaza. And guess who are demonstrating that so beautifully? It is the people of Gaza. The people of Gaza are demonstrating that. How can they say Alhamdulillah after they lose a child? How can they say it's because they have this belief in al-ghaib? They have this iman in what they cannot see. They know, they have certainty in their heart that they know Allah is planning for them, not against them, right? So, but we as bystanders or watchers or observers of what is happening from afar, we need to take care of this heart and the lens in which it is viewing. Because if you don't take care of this heart, shaitan will fill it with all the wrong truths, with all the wrong messages, with falsehood, with al-batil, not al-haq, right? And that is so important. So even as you're watching this, you have an obligation, and that is how I have to take care of this heart. I have to look for value with Allah. I have to look for belief in the unseen and what is happening. I have to attach my heart to who Allah is, because I know that everything that is happening has value and has meaning. You know, since October 7th and this genocide started, a lot of people, you know, would ask questions like, well, but why can't Allah just save the people of Gaza? Like, Allah could, of course He could. Kun fayakun, simple as that. Allah could. So why isn't Allah doing it? Of course, we leave the whys and the hows, and we never know for sure what Allah's wisdom is, right? But we believe that He has wisdom in everything. But through reflection, we can think of some things, right? We can think of all the ways in which Allah is working in our favor. And I want you to think about this. You know, in my work, you know, as a therapist, sometimes people in the process of healing, they don't want to go through the difficulty, because healing is difficult. To heal, it requires effort. It requires to face your pain. It requires, you to face difficult truths. It's not an easy process. And so sometimes people wish, why can't Allah just heal me? Why do I have to go through this pain? Why do I have to go through the healing? It's the same thing, you know, a person gets wounded. Yes, Allah could heal that person. Simple as that. But why does the person have to go through going to the doctor, the wound being probed, disinfectant, putting on it, which stings, and you know, all the things that go in that hurt, but for the wound to heal? Why does that happen? Why do we have to see such horror, such great things that are happening, you know, such difficult things that are happening before we see victory? First of all, the horror that is happening is because of evil people, right? But of course, Allah could, just like that, like I said, you know, remove it. But why doesn't He? Because Allah knows what needs to happen. Allah knows His creation more than we do. And Allah has we have to understand, this is what submission is. We submit to Allah's understanding, you know, and we submit our own understanding. This is what I mean about letting your heart's intellect rise above your mind's intellect, because this is what we do in sujood. In sujood, you humble this part of the brain that always wants to know. You know, this is the part of the brain, we call it the prefrontal cortex. This is the part of the brain that engages in advanced thinking. It engages in abstract thinking. It's the part of the brain that differentiates us from animals. This is the part that you engage in to plan and to make decisions. And this is the part that is often associated with a lot of people's anxieties and a lot of people's worries. And yet in sujood, this is the part we humble. This most advanced part, we humble it to the ground. And in sujood, it's the closest position that we are to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's the closest, most noble position that we can be in. And yet in this position, we humble this most advanced part of the brain. You know, most advanced part of us as human beings, as they say, right? That's why I put quotations, because it is the most advanced part of the brain, but it's not the most. Like I said, the heart is a higher intellect. But in sujood, it shows you this truth, because in sujood, you're humbling the brain, and guess what's higher? The heart, to show you don't have to know everything. And even if you think you know everything, you humble your understanding you humble your own understanding, your own limited mind, your own capacity to figure things out. You humble it in front of Allah, the one who knows what you do not know, right? Alimul ghaibi wa shahada, right? So he knows what you do not know. He knows the unseen. He knows, way beyond our capacity. We're so limited. And so as you're absorbing, when you don't understand, remember that is a moment for you to humble yourself. You're not meant to understand everything. You're not meant to understand why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is doing everything. Just as a child is not meant to understand why a parent is doing everything they're doing. They're not meant to understand that. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also, we have to be sure that Allah has wisdom in everything that He's doing. And one of the things that comes up for me is that, like I was saying, the example I gave when I work with people in healing is that if Allah, let's say, healed those people that say, why can't Allah just heal me? If Allah healed you right away, He just healed you. You didn't have to go through the process. You get robbed of the gifts of the process itself. Yes, it's painful, but it is the process itself that brings the truth to the surface. It's the process itself that really is the gift, that really changes, that really transforms the person. So if Allah gives it to you, you never go through this process. There's no transformation. When we look at what's happening in Gaza, since October 7th, there has been so much that's been changing gradually. Some are obvious, some are not so obvious. Some are seen and some are not so seen. What is seen is the amount of people that came to Islam, the amount of people that found the truth, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala facilitated a process where the truth became so evident to people who are not guided. And He utilized the people of Gaza to make that truth be guided. He utilized the best of people. Through their hardship, He utilized the best of people to be a means of guiding so many people. But there's a process that needs to happen. As we saw this past year, so much truth is coming to the surface. That needs a process. That needs time for the truth to start coming to the surface, for falsehood to become clear, where Allah is distinguishing now, is making it clearer and clearer between what is haqq and what is batil. That if Allah just did that, fixed it, people would not get that opportunity to see what is truth and what is false. People would not be guided. So the process itself has many gifts. Yes, there's evil, and Allah will judge those people. Yes, there's hardship. Yes, there's great suffering. But through it all, as a believer, we have to look at it as, what is Allah doing for His ummah? What is Allah doing, especially, for the amount of martyrs, the amount of people that Allah gave Jannah to. The martyr, when he sees Jannah, he will wish he could come back to the earth and be killed over and over again just to experience the Jannah that he saw. But if all you see is this world, if all you're connected to is what is visible, what is seen, and you're so disconnected from al-ghaib, the unseen, you will look at Gaza and you won't be able to process. It'll just be absorbing, and then it weighs heavily on you. So you have to engage this heart. In psychology, there's this branch of psychology called existential psychology, and every branch of psychology attempts to look at struggles through a different lens. And existential psychology looks at struggles through the lens of a person's existence and their connection to their purpose. And it basically says, a few things. One, it says that a person's disconnect from how temporary this life is only creates anxiety for that person. So when a person has not come to terms with how temporary this life is and have not come to terms with their death, meaning that there's going to be a point where they're not existing, that it only creates anxiety. This is so interesting, right? Because the more we know this in Islam, the more a person is attached to this dunya and forgets their meeting with Allah, the more their problems increase. But their ability to also process and navigate what is happening to them becomes harder and harder. So their anxiety goes up. This world was not designed to be our permanent reality. So if you make it your permanent reality, it becomes so much harder to process anything you witness that happens to you or happens to others. You fall into that state of why would this happen? Why would this happen? Because this is your own reality. This is your most permanent reality. But when you are so deeply connected to the fact that you have a meeting with Allah, that there's a judgment day, the greatest of courts, where every oppressor will be taken into account, there's an eternal life, a greater life, where this life compared to that life is like if you put your finger into the ocean and you take it out, the water on your finger is like the dunya compared to the akhirah, which is like the ocean. That's how insignificant this world is. This is what allows the people of Gaza to get to basically be who they are and have that strength. It's because their connection to the world that is the ocean is so much greater. They understand that this world is only a few drops compared to the akhirah. And so their connection to that is so strong. But subhanAllah, in existential psychology, it's not a Muslim, it's not an Islamic approach, but it understands this, that people's disconnect from their death and from their inevitable death creates more anxiety in their life. Their disconnect from their purpose creates more anxiety. Viktor Frankl, who is an Austrian psychiatrist and a Holocaust survivor, he's a big influencer in this in existential psychology. He has a book. It's called Man's Search for Meaning, and he basically, as a Holocaust survivor, he talks about how he basically principles of surviving such horrors. And one thing he says is that everything can be taken from a man, but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstance, to choose one's way. So I'm going to repeat that again. He says everything can be taken from a man, but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, it is to choose one's attitude in any given of your circumstances, to choose one's own way. So he says that everything can be taken except this. Nobody can take this away from you, which is how you view your attitude, your approach, your response to what you witness. And this is, and he also says, actually, those who have a why to live can bear with almost anyhow. So he basically is saying that, and this is where they derived a lot of the teachings around meaning in existential psychology, but basically saying that when we are connected to the meaning behind what we go through, we can get through anything. So our ability to derive meaning from our circumstances protects us from that pain turning into suffering. So people say, there's an expression, obviously I do know that people can suffer in this world, but just for the sake of this example, there's a saying that says pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. I do think in many circumstances, suffering is optional, where because we do not look for meaning, that pain turns into suffering. Because we do not look for meaning, our pain and our ability to interpret things and what's happening around us become worsened. So we have to look for meaning. We need meaning. What is meaning? Meaning is a truth of significance. It is a value. It is something that you're looking to derive from everything that you go through. This is what we're essentially taught to do as Muslims. We go through something, we look for value with Allah. We witness something horrible, we look for value with Allah. No matter what happens, we are busy taking care of this heart. If you look at Islam, you will see that everything Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us through Islam is meaning, which then leads us to really assess, am I looking for meaning? Am I looking for value with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through everything that I'm witnessing? Am I connected to the akhirah? Am I connected to al-ghaib? Am I connected to the unseen? Am I connected to Jannah? Am I connected to the rewards that Allah gives for suffering in this world? Of course, many of us know the hadith where the Prophet ﷺ, he says, wondrous is the affair, or strange is the affair of the believer, for there is good for him in every situation, every matter. And that is not the case for anyone but the believer. SubhanAllah, this trait where a person finds goodness and value in everything that they go through can only be a trait of a believer. The Prophet ﷺ said, it's not the case with anyone except the believer. If he is happy, he thanks Allah, and there is good for him. And if he is harmed, he shows patience, and there is good for him. One thing I will say is that we have to be intentional about even our interaction with, social media, because if you're on there and you're just absorbing, and you're not actually taking that to Allah, and you're not sitting with it with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you're not transferring that emotion and what you're absorbing in a positive direction, in the best of directions, in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, through dua, through being useful, it's going to affect you. So monitor how you're engaging with what you're absorbing, what you're doing with it, and also how much, because balance is important. If you're on there just absorbing, you're not doing anything useful, there's no point. The reason people are sharing, and we're sharing all this stuff about Palestine, is not for people who already understand how horrific the situation is. It's for those the point of sharing is for those who are ignorant to see the truth. So, but if you're sitting there and you're just absorbing, and you already know that this is horrible and this is what's going on, then you're harming yourself that way. It's better to take that time and energy and spend it in making dua, in, working on yourself, because Allah does not change the condition of a people unless they can change the condition of themselves, right? Until they change what is in themselves. This is in the Quran. Verily, God does not change the condition of a people until they change what is within themselves. So our inner condition reflects our outer condition. So you are better off using that time to work on yourself, to make dua, to spend time in being proactive, whether you are bringing awareness or being useful. So that's how we show up powerfully. Shaitan wants you to stay in that state of, oh my gosh, look what's happening. He wants you to forget two things. He wants you to forget that despite how horrific the world seems, despite how chaotic the world seems, he wants you to forget two truths. One is that Allah is still in control. Allah is still in control. Many people forget this. So many things are happening. No. Allah is in control. Allah is still the best of planners. Allah is still planning. Allah is still the most powerful. Allah still owns and controls his creation. Nothing can happen without the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So everything is moving in the direction of how Allah wants it ultimately, despite how chaotic you see it. It's moving according to his will. So trust in that. But Shaitan also wants you to disconnect from another truth, which is how powerful you are. Of course, our power comes from Allah. Our use comes from Allah. And Allah is the most powerful. And he's the source of any power we have. But he wants you to forget the power you have to show up. And that is what I mean. He wants you to forget the power you have to show up, to help. He wants you to be hopeless. He wants you to think, what's the point? So you stop making dua, so you stop donating, you stop showing up, you stop caring about what's happening to our brothers and sisters. That's what he wants. He wants us to be complacent. He wants us to be asleep, not awakened. So be careful of this. If what you're absorbing isn't making you connect to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, isn't making you show up powerfully, then you're not transferring it in the right direction. You're not engaging your heart in the process. And that's very important. I was going to say something else, but I forgot. Yeah, khair, inshallah. Just, I just, as a reminder to myself and to you, I remember now, alhamdulillah. So there's, the hadith where the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he tells us that even if the day of judgment is befalling us and you are planting a small plant, a sapling, to still plant it anyway. I want you to think about this, because as we're witnessing what's happening, we're so overwhelmed by it. And that can discourage people from doing good, from showing up and doing good, even their good deeds. It doesn't have to, I don't mean just towards for Palestine, but just good deeds in general. People are getting into a state of hopelessness. I want you to think about this. Yes, what we're witnessing is chaotic. Yes, what we're witnessing is horrific, but is there anything more chaotic than the day of judgment befalling us? No. But even then, the Prophet ﷺ is telling you that even if the day of judgment is befalling you, nothing as chaotic as the day of judgment, nothing as horrific as the day of judgment. But even then, if you are planting a small plant, to do it anyway. Why? That plant that you're going to plant, is it going to be destroyed by the day of judgment? Absolutely. The earth gets rolled up, right? Everything becomes destroyed in this dunya. Why is the Prophet ﷺ telling us to plant something that's going to be destroyed? Because what is essentially the value of your action? It's your intention. It is your intention to do good. That is what you bring to Allah. So even if you don't see that plant become, big, grow and become and blossom and bloom, your value is with Allah. You already did good. And that's all that matters with Allah. But many of us are disconnected from our intentions. We're just going through the motions, and we feel like, if we don't think it's going to produce a good outcome, we already make the decision not to do the good deed anyway. That means that we're disconnected from al-ghaib, the unseen, the akhirah. We're disconnected from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the value that our intentions hold with Allah, even if the outcome is not what we wanted. You already gain and you already win when you intend to do good for the sake of Allah. So it's time to change where the eye of your heart is. Take the eye of your heart away from the outcome of this world. Like, when is Palestine going to be free? When is this? Like, direct it to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So of course we want Palestine to be free. We want, the Muslim world to be restored. We want it to be beautified. We want our ummah to be united. We want all these things. But the eye of my heart is still fixated on Allah. And when I do good, I do it for the sake of Allah. And I don't judge the value of what I'm doing by the outcome of what I see in the world. It still has value with Allah, even if you don't see it in front of you. How do we reduce our anxiety amidst... I will start taking questions now. How do we reduce our anxiety amidst the process of facing challenges? So number one, you start filling your heart with the truths that Allah taught us, number one, okay? Meaning what? You want your foundation to be Allah's truths. You want Allah's truths, Allah's words to override your own narrative, your own thoughts, your own. So the more we connect to the Quran, they did a survey actually of what was helping people navigate after October 7th, what was helping people navigate, processing what's happening in Palestine, everything we were witnessing online. And the greatest thing that was helping people is the Quran. See, when you connect to the Quran and Allah's words become your priority, His words start to override your words and the words of the world and the thoughts that you have and the narratives that are playing out. His words start to override the falsehood that we are connected to that create anxiety for us. We're attached to so many things that are false. Shaitan is in our ears whispering false things so that we get more anxious, we get more worried, while detaching from Allah's promises that secure the heart and wrap the heart with this security. So first and foremost, we always start with Allah. We always start with Al-Haq. We always start with His words. We always start with the Quran. We always start with making sure that we are obeying Allah, we are praying on time, we are reading Quran, we're following the prescriptions that Allah gave us. And I say that because it's so easy for us to neglect those things and then wonder why we're anxious and not feeling grounded. But still, the anxiety is normal for even the most religious people, but it's still going to be in balance. It's not going to be basically when you ground yourself in the Quran, when you ground yourself in Allah's prescription, it doesn't mean you're never going to have anxiety in life. That's what I'm saying. But it's going to not be as out of control as maybe it was before, where it's affecting your functioning, it's affecting the way you show up. So first we want to ground ourselves in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Secondly, we want to be present. The antidote to being anxious is building the muscle of presence. You see, anxiety has a lot to do with being in the next moment, thinking about the future. Many people struggle with anxiety because they cannot be present. So it's a muscle though, and people think it should come easily. Oh, I'm just one of those people that can't be present. No, you're just one of those people that have not worked on building the muscle of presence. It's like somebody saying they're going to do a new workout and they say, I'm just one of those people that doesn't know how to run or jump or do this or that. No, you can be. And anybody who's into fitness and works out knows how you can think you can't do something, and the more you work out and the more you try that exercise, you can do it. And you're like, oh my, subhanallah, I wasn't able to do this before, now I can. So we forget that psychological and spiritual strengths are also muscles we have to build. Presence is a muscle we have to build. Every time you find yourself going into the next moment, going into past or the future, bring yourself in the here and now and tell yourself there's no more sacred space than the present. The present is the only space you can connect with Allah. It's the only space where you can work on something and actually change something. If your mind is off in the future and the past, you can't change anything. And that's where shaitan wants you, by the way. He wants you being anywhere except the present, because the present is the most sacred space, and it's the most powerful space, and it's the space you can actually make a change. I see some questions here about how do we differentiate between what the heart wants and what the mind wants and thought processes. Inshallah, I'll try to cover those things in future sessions, but I do cover these topics extensively in my book, The Compass Home. It takes you on a journey of understanding the heart over mind and ego method, the home method, and what is the brain for, what is the mind for, what is the heart for. And I lay out for you a journey from theory to practice on how to navigate your inner world and experience greater alignment and inner peace. So you can find it on Amazon, inshallah. All right, I'm so sorry for going over time. I will stop here. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.